So here we are, leading up to another Anzac Day clash. This time, Collingwood's in the positive. 2 wins, 1 loss. After, it was a shaky start against St Kilda, but we righted the ship and it ended up being a pretty comprehensive win. And frankly, I'd like to think that this puts some of the doubts for people aside. We are still going to be a competitive team. Let's just give it some time so we can show what we're truly made of. Gone Critical, my guest, well, now as always, apparently, my lovable co-host. How are you today?
I'm well, very well, and looking forward to Saturday greatly.
It's such a big fixture on the calendar. I've been only to one Anzac Day, but even that the atmosphere and everything associated with it was really quite special. And as someone who hasn't been to a grand final, it's certainly the biggest game of football I've ever been to. So it certainly holds a lot of weight.
Well, I'm lucky because I've been to every one. So, wow. And the first one, the 95 match, was just I don't know, for a non-final, I've never been to a match like it. It was just so gripping.
I couldn't imagine the environment if I tried. Magpie Girl, what are your memories of Anzac Day? Have you been to a couple of the games?
Yeah, I have. I haven't been to one for about maybe 7 or 8 years, but I did go to pretty much every one before that. So they really are fantastic days to be at. I think there's nothing like being at the MCG with 100,000 people there and enjoying a minute's silence. I think it's one of the most moving minutes that you can experience. And look, there's an awful lot made of it now, and in some ways I think it's got a bit out of hand. But when you're there on the day, there's nothing like it, and it's even more moving. Well, it's very moving, and it's in some ways it's more special than the grand final.
Well, it's certainly going to be a moving moment for the group of debutants we have playing on the weekend. I think it's 8 players lining up for their first Anzac Day. But before we get to that, it's important that we cover the week that was, the game against St Kilda. I mentioned in the introduction, a bit of a shaky opening quarter. I wasn't. I was none too impressed. I think I was pacing in my living room watching it, but we certainly turned things around and showed that we've got a lot of character in the side and a lot of individuals who are still capable of standing up and playing high-level football. What do you think, GC?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a progression game for us. What part of what we're looking at is how can our old and our new mesh together? And we saw a vintage Swanee performance, which was fantastic. But, we need some of the youngsters to track themselves along quite quickly. Tim Broomhead's been a bit of a tease, and I've, for one, got to say I didn't hop on his bandwagon straight on, but I bought a big ticket on the week on Friday night, and I'm on his bandwagon now. And Crisp is the other one I thought really showed us something that he can be part going forward, that big body. And his kicking wasn't too bad. I thought he really added something. So that's what I'm looking for, to see which of these kids now are going to step up and become, permanent fixtures, then B graders, then A graders, hopefully.
It's interesting you mentioned Chris. I mean, I've been impressed with him for each of the games he's played. I think he's contributed something. And I think his kicking does get talked about a lot as probably a weak point. From a technical point of view, he seems pretty sound. I think everything seems to be very quick for him. Similar to Ben Kennedy, almost like he's trying to do things at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I guess the nature of where Chris has been playing, bursting out of packs, doesn't really give him the time to compose. But I think I mentioned another thread. We've got 2 guys who are meant to be our premier inside ball winners, and Taylor Adams and Levi Greenwood, who play on the weekend. And with these guys in the side, guys like Chris are going to get a little bit more time around the ball to free up. So certainly very positive.
And still cycling.
Absolutely, and Steele Sidebottom, who I think I even forgot to mention in one of the other threads. But we are missing a number of players running through that midfield group, and that I think the weekend's effort a bit more pleasing. The one thing I wanted to pick out from last weekend's game, and Jamie Elliott had a great game. I've been really impressed with the way he started the year. He's building into it. He had 4 goals, and I honestly think he should have had 6. And he's a kid that I actually want to see back himself a little bit, right? To take a mark within 40 and go for the shot. Am I nitpicking there, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he's definitely a forward who looks to share, and he could become a bit more greedy. And I think all those really great forwards have a degree of greediness about them, or they want to score, they want to be kicking goals. So I think he can do more of that.
But last Friday night was the first. I think that's the first time since he was out injured last year where he actually looked more confident. He was taking kicks from further out, and he was marking well. It just looked like he finally had a bit of confidence in his body, and looked like he was really getting in touch with his old form.
The other one I thought for our forward line was having the 3 big men down there. And although Corey Galt didn't have a lot of stats, he competed well, and his mobility, I thought, really added to our structure.
Absolutely.
And really gave the other 2 room. And I think especially for this week, I'm glad he's back in, because I think wet weather, he's going to give us a degree of mobility amongst the big man that might be important on the night.
The way I see it was with the 2 extra guys helping out Brodie Grundy, it allowed him to have his best game, and he terrorised Billy Longer all night long, and that was such a really pleasing thing to see for his development. Who some people thought he might have stalled a bit last year. I think he had 23 or 24 touches, the majority of the hit outs, and he really controlled that. So giving him a chop out this week against a big guy like Bell Chambers is going to be a huge asset for us. The other thing was I was a bit critical, I think, of our small defenders in my player review. And in my opinion, rightly so. I watched the game back today. Ramsey's the one that I picked on, and I'm a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of his endeavour and his work. But I honestly thought that on the weekend, when there was pressure on, he didn't respond particularly well. His ball use wasn't great. And he's the one for me that looks like the vulnerable odd one out. Him, Tuvey, and Oxley, to me, play very similar roles. Seedsman is the rebounder and the true rebounder of all of them. I'd rather see Seedsman start, but I get the feeling he'll be the one wearing the vest. What are your thoughts?
I'd be a bit kinder to Ramsey. I thought a couple of times under pressure he took a couple of marks and a couple of intercepts that were important. He does need to tidy up what he does with the ball a bit, but he's still only playing about his 4th game. Seedsman for the vest, I hope not. I agree with you. I think Seedsman, I liked how he played. He didn't have a great game, but again, he did a couple of things that show that he's got something that we don't have a lot of, which is an ability to intercept and then break lines and kick well. So, it's a good question. I'm not sure about the vest this week.
He has that flair, doesn't he? And when he gets going, I mean, he's another one who's coming back from a long absence, and it was good to see a bit of that flash and daring the other night. And it adds a buzz, I think, to the team, which is really great.
I just think for me, when I look at that back 6, as I said, Tuvey, Oxley, Ramsey, Frost, Brown, they're all very blue collar players. Very, very good workers, and they do their best and really put in 100% effort. But coming out of defence, we saw that in round 2, the amount of turnovers. We also saw a lot of turnovers that we weren't punished in the first round and the third round against the Saints. So you've got to have a better ball user out of that back half. Yeah,
I'd say Oxley's a bit. I think Oxley can use the ball well. I think on the Adelaide game he was under a lot of pressure and burned it a few times, but I don't think that's his characteristic game. And so I think he with Seedsman and Tommy Langdon can be deliverers, but Seedsman's the one that's potentially got the best delivery.
Well, we didn't get a flush of wins, unfortunately, on the weekend. We did lose in the VFL. I couldn't get a good feed of the game, and I wasn't able to appraise what was going on. But it seems like the big man, Darcy Moore, our big unwrapped present from last year, had another pretty good game. He's listed as an emergency this week. When do we unleash this animal, and when do we start bringing in some of these young midfielders?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I'm not at all worried, to tell you the truth. I wouldn't care if they had 5 weeks in the VFL, because they're so brand new, and it takes kids that time. I don't think that'll hurt them at all, as much as we all want to see them. So, well, I'm just very much of when they earn a spot, when they are clearly better than one of the incumbents. And if that's next week or it's in 5 or 6 weeks, well, so be it.
I think it's rough business to drop a raft of players after a 60, 70-point win. But guys like...
no chance this week for them.
No, absolutely not. But guys like Witts has got to be close now as he's come back from injury, and it's going to be interesting seeing the dynamic between he and Grundy and who ends up being the first ruckman and how they balance that. It's big. That's a bit of a selection headache for Bucks. The other big headache coming out of that weekend was Ben Reid. I think we finally clarified that it was a cork, so not the retirement-inducing quad injury that some people were bleating on about. But I think it's a good decision to rest him now for a few weeks and get him right for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think if we can put ourselves to sleep on worrying about him and just be thankful when he comes back, and otherwise we're just going to send ourselves balmy, stressing about every move that he makes.
And because for these guys to get a bit of cohesion and a bit more experience and start playing as a unit and without too much disruption. You don't want to be chopping and changing the team.
And you made mention before, he is a player that, obviously can add something to our team, but we've got to kind of put that out of sight, out of mind. Whatever he comes back as, it might be a different player. He might not have the same impact, but we know what he's capable of. It's just letting him get his body right and bring him in when we can.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing for him.
That's the key. Now, we've only made one change to the team this week. My boy Patrick has been unceremoniously dismissed after wearing the vest and really not doing anything wrong. I'm a little bit cut up about it. But it's probably the one change that was going to be made with Taylor Adams coming in. Brief thoughts on that.
And I feel very sorry for Paddy Carnesis, and I loved it when he clearly was happy to say, how good was this? This was my dream. This is like all us Collingwood supporters. He's actually lived it. But I'm rapt that he still thinks that way. I thought he did well, but Adams had to come back in, and for me, he was the obvious one to come out, because I don't think we could have put him off the sub bench, and I think he's better off probably going back and having a stint in the VFL. He was the obvious one, and the next question then is who do we sub this week? Because that's the next difficult question.
Yeah, and despite my commentary regarding our small defenders, we still haven't conceded a score of over 100 points. So something's going right. Something is going better than last year in that regard. Maybe the opposition isn't brilliant yet, but the point is we're still holding teams. So I guess you can't knock a philosophy. But I'd love to see Paddy get a few games in a row without the vest, hopefully at some point this year.
Oh, I think he'll get back. He's just. I think there's going to be a lot of times this year someone will be unlucky because, when Sidebottom, Greenwood, Reid, these blokes come back, if the team's going okay, you're going to have to tip some young performers out, perhaps.
And there'll be guys. Freeman had 22 touches on the weekend, 5 clearances, and 13 contested possessions. This kid's coming, and he wants to play. Braden Maynard, 15 touches, 6 tackles. Playing across the back half. Degui, 18 touches, 4 inside 50s, 4 tackles. Now these are, I made mention in another thread that in 2 or 3 years, our midfield running through it, Pendlebury, Crisp, Sidebottom, Greenwood, Adams, Degui, Broomhead, Freeman. Now that's 8 deep.
And Ben Kennedy would have probably been starting the year if he didn't get ill. So we're going to squeeze him in now.
We are going to have a few guys who are going to be a little bit unlucky. But before we start talking ourselves up as final threats, I think our next guest will have something to say about that. Put paid to that across the weekend. All right. Good evening, Jade. How do I find you this evening?
Not too bad at all. It's nice to be joining you all, and I'm very privileged to be the allotted person this week to raise the tooth in head ratio for this group. So glad to be here.
There was
Back
only
straight away.
there was only one obvious choice, really. I mean, you've come across to our board, challenged us on a number of years, lost most of them. Let's be honest. Even despite your illegal augmentation of your players, but we really appreciate the banter that you've been able to have with us Collingwood faithful. You're a rare breed, Jade. We're really impressed.
No, it's actually nice to get over there. I think I've had that particular banter thread and associated wager going for about 5 years. And I think the only year that I actually didn't do it was the 1 year that we've won in the last 5 years. So I don't think that's a good sign leading into this weekend, to be honest.
I see the intrepid Maggie 5 has taken you on.
He or she, I should say, has taken me on. So we'll see how that one goes.
What's it actually like going back to the Essendon board after a loss? With yourself adorned with our Collingwoodness.
Well, it's actually not too bad. I think the board generally nowadays expects that sort of thing from me. So I mean, I've been draped in Collingwood colours, in North Melbourne colours, Richmond colours, even I think at one stage. So I think they sort of they've sort of gotten used to it and sort of expect it from me.
And maybe, Jade, you're getting a bit of a taste for the black and white. Then it sounds.
Well, I do like getting on that particular thread, but in terms of putting it on permanently, no, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Never say never, Jade. Never say never. Now, look, I do want to talk a little bit about your Bombers because with a little bit of luck and probably a bit more of a comprehensive pre-season, you guys will probably be 3-0, having run out the first game a little bit poorly. Now, I've tipped you guys in the top 4. I want to know what your thoughts are on your team and how you guys have performed so far this year.
I mean, so far this year we've obviously played okay. I think that a number of Essendon supporters do tend to possibly overrate us a little bit based on what we've seen over the first 3 weeks. I mean, when you looked at the fixture and you saw that we had Sydney in Sydney and then obviously Hawthorn at the MCG. In the first 2 rounds, it's quite an easy thing to say that, okay, well, we could logically expect to be 0-2 coming out of the first 2 rounds. But the funny thing is that we have recently actually matched up quite well against both Sydney and Hawthorn. Sydney rarely actually blows us out of the park, so to speak. So having a very close loss to them was not a surprising thing. Obviously, the fact that we were 6 or 7 goals in front, getting into the third quarter was a bit disappointing. But considering the fact that we did have the interrupted pre-season, we were playing up there. It was a hard game. It was not entirely unexpected. And against Hawthorn, I mean, a lot of people forget that the year before, I believe we lost at Etihad Stadium by 2 points to the Hawks. So it's not an unusual thing for us to be actually quite close to the Hawks. So and we came out of those first 2 games, and obviously people were thinking, well, Essendon actually do look quite good, and in a lot of people's minds, we would have obviously had a fair amount of our players suspended leading into those 2 games. So, they really did mark them down as 2 losses. So I think the Carlton game, the one we played last week, was probably a little bit more telling than the first 2 games in terms of, we did play a team that we honestly were expected to beat. I think the thing that was promising coming out of that game was the fact that we did actually beat them. I think for those people that actually did see the game, obviously Essendon didn't play fantastically well. I mean, we were obviously smashed it in the contested side of the game. So being able to come out with a win against a side that we were honestly expected to beat, when in the past we have actually dropped those sort of games, I think was probably a promising thing. I think anyone that heavily favours Essendon leading into the Anzac Day clash has probably not been paying a lot of attention to what's happened thus far. As far as I'm concerned, this is really as much of a 50-50 game as you can get. So, look, I think we've done reasonably well, but I certainly don't buy into the fact that we are showing the signs of a top 4 side at this particular moment.
I think the thing for me is when I look back at the last 3 years, and I've watched a lot of Essendon, I've got a few Essendon supporting mates, I don't know why, but and I've looked back at you've started years well, you've actually played periods of very good football, and there's obviously been a distraction behind the scenes that hasn't had a positive effect, but the team is building to something. And I wouldn't imagine that the powers that be at Essendon would add the certain players they have, Cooney, Chapman, even a couple of years ago, Brendan Goddard, if they didn't feel like they were in the frame. And the truth is, right now, with where your list profile is, you should be in the frame. So the good form doesn't surprise me. It hasn't surprised me. I think that you're right in saying, however, that Saturday does become much more of a 50-50 game. Gone critical? I mean, these games are always very close anyway. There's always a lot of tight ball, a lot of tight contests, and it's not really, it's never really a blowout.
Yeah, and I think I think the other thing I always look pretty close at Carlton Essendon games. I like going to them often. I was almost tempted to barrack for Carlton this week for the first time in my life, but I resisted that temptation. But I always think you throw form out of the door a little bit with these 3 teams, and that's why I'm not surprised that Carlton got up a bit last week. I wouldn't read that much into that. I think Essendon's other 2 weeks really were more significant. But this week, I think we're coming a bit. Essendon's up. It's hard to pick because these games are hard to pick. I'd make Essendon favourite, but do I think we can win? Yeah, if we get out there and... in fact, I thought on the weekend we were practising our spiel that we gave St Kilda 3 or 4 goals lead, and that's our usual thing now for Anzac Day. So we reel them in and go past them. That's what we probably do on this Saturday too, isn't it? We were only 7 goals behind at quarter time last year, weren't we, in the Anzac Day game?
Oh, were you now?
And how many did we win by? Gone critical? I can't remember. About 6 or 7 goals, wasn't it?
About the same.
It's about that.
It was level at half time, I think.
Yeah, about that.
Sorry, I had to bring that in one.
And rightly so.
But they are good. They are good games. And look, we are
fantastic games.
Yeah, and we were talking before you came on, Jade, about the atmosphere there being just incredible. And as Gone Critical pointed out, you do put form out the window with the big Victorian clubs. It doesn't matter where we are on the ladder; it's always going to be a good game. Who should we be looking out for from Essendon? We know the main offenders, the Watsons, the bloody Zaharakis, the Greek, the Carlisles. Who should we be looking out for to really make an impact this year?
I mean, having a look at this game, I mean, there's a couple of things that do stand out between the two teams. Collingwood have obviously been a very good contested possession side. Not only this year but in previous years, whereas Essendon, funnily enough, have not been as good a contested possession side as the Pies have been. However, on the flip side of that is the fact that Essendon are a very, very good uncontested possession side, being able to create space and actually get around the defences of opposition sides. So it's a funny game this year in terms of you really are looking at two teams that have got very different styles of play, if you wanted to put it that way. So from an Essendon perspective, what you'd be looking at, obviously Cal Hooker has been sensational for 18 months, if not 2 years. I have had some discussions with Collingwood fans in relation to Travis Cloke, who obviously is a very, very good key forward. I think if Cal Hooker does in fact get on top of Travis Cloke, if in fact he does go to him, Hurley is obviously another option. That'll go a long way to securing the game for Essendon. The other players I'd be looking at in terms of potential dangers for the Pies leading into this game. would be players such as Courtney Dempsey, who's been named this week. I know that he's just coming into the side, but considering that the way that we play in terms of trying to play that keepings off game and being able to create space between defensive players, David Zaharakis, as obviously you've mentioned, there is obviously a very dangerous player against the Pies because of his ability to get into space and deliver the ball low and hard. He could pose a problem. On top of that, players such as Zach Merritt, for example, who does tend to find himself in space a lot of the time. So any of those players there that are actually able to sort of get away from their direct opponent and actually present options, particularly to the Essendon defenders such as Hibben and Baguley, could potentially present those sort of issues to the Pies. Obviously we've still got the old man and Dustin Fletcher down the back there who delivers the ball very well from defensive 50. Hurley and Hooker have obviously been sensational in the opening round. So, from an Essendon perspective, in terms of the players that could potentially cause problems, I think they would be the ones.
Even a guy like Melksham's really starting to come into his own a bit this year. So, look, I can't sing, unfortunately, the praise of the Bombers high enough. But on the other side of the fence, I think that we've got some players that will do a bit of damage as well. What are your thoughts, Gone Critical? What are you going to be looking for on Saturday?
Well, I think Pendlebury was clearly a bit hampered last week, but still did very well. And Swanee, I mean, we were rapt to see Swanee back, and he seems to love this day. So he's those two we're looking for to be very dangerous. But I think Essendon supporters probably won't know a few of our younger guys that have been stepping up the last couple of weeks. So
Oxley,
Broomhead, Crisp, Galt. Yeah, Galt. I mean, Galt will be important structurally, but I think particularly those three, if they can frank what they did last week and just keep stepping up, they've got a dangerous look about them. The other guy that I wanted to drop last week was Trav Varco, because I thought he was deplorable against Adelaide, but he was a new man when he came out last week. So I think, if he can continue on that form that he gave us last week, he'll be another string to our bow.
Oh, Travis Varco really grew a set last week. I had not seen him attack the ball with that sort of ferocity at any point in his career. Look, I think Collingwood are really still building into the year, and I think it is going to take a while for us to see our best. But one that I also think that we haven't commented about a bit is how important someone like Nathan Brown is for us this week. Now, Danaher is starting to shine a little bit. You start seeing more than just glimpses of potential, whereas Brownie's looked a bit pedestrian. GC, what are your thoughts on that matchup particularly?
I wonder whether, I wonder who'll go to him. I guess it'll depend on how fit Carlisle is as well. But I would have almost thought mobility-wise, I would have been chucking Jack Frost at Danaher and Brown on to Carlisle.
Yeah, I'd agree.
But Brownie needs. He's been dependable, but if he has that little vulnerable look that we think if someone really gets off the leash on him, he could be in a bit of trouble.
I think for us, it just comes down, I think, to slowing down Essendon's ball movement. The spread and the ball use is quite strong. It's very impressive to see when they've got their flow on. So that's going to be a bit concerning for us, and we'll test our depth of our midfielders.
Will they try and tag Joe Watson?
Look, I don't know. I'm not sure, and to be honest, he's not the one that I'd tag. I mean, I've got a theory that someone like Watson's going to win his own ball anyway. It's just the game he plays. Brent Stanton and probably Jake Melksham are the two that I'd look at tagging. Dyson Heppel, if you had someone to run with him. Well, what are your thoughts on this, Jade? Because I honestly believe that a guy like Watson will win his ball.
Well, I think we've seen it a couple of times in commentary in the media lately that they label some players untaggable, essentially. And honestly, I don't believe that as a concept. I mean, we saw Bernie Vince gave Patrick Dangerfield I wouldn't say he gave him a touch-up, but he certainly negated his influence in the game this weekend. So if you're going to tag someone, honestly, I do believe it should be Joe Watson. He, left to his own devices, and particularly if he starts getting loose, he would hurt the Pies on Anzac Day. Stanton, look, you can. There's a thought that you can actually tag Stanton so that he's effectively out of the game, and to be honest, it's probably not a bad thought. You probably can do that if you've got a tagger that's effective enough. Where I think that would be an issue is that Stanton nowadays, as compared to say 3 or 4 years ago, is no longer the the second, third, or fourth midfielder in the Essendon side. You're looking at a guy that is the sixth or seventh midfielder and an outside runner. I think if you're going to tag anyone that could potentially influence the game, it would be Dyson Heppel would be the one I'd be looking at. As far as you did say Jake Melksham there. Melksham himself will likely get a tagging role on Swan or Pendlebury. Obviously, I don't know which one he'll go to. I suspect it'll be Swan and not Pendlebury. So I would doubt that he would get a tag himself. So, were I looking at Collingwood and suggesting what they should be looking to do in this game, I would suggest that they actually look at Dyson Heppel. Joe Watson, I suspect you'll find will end up going head-to-head with Dane Swan. Obviously, you're not going to have an agreement between coaches to do that pre-game, so we don't know whether that'll actually happen, but I wouldn't be surprised to see that eventuality.
Look, it's got all the makings of a very, very interesting contest. I think we'll start to wrap up there, but I'm very thankful that you've been able to come on, Jade. This has been a very enlightening discussion. 2 weeks in a row, we've had some brilliant supporters on that I've had the chance to chat with. So, Jade, thank you so much for being a part of this. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And for your continued involvement on the Collingwood board, mate. You're welcome to come on any time and have a bit of a chat with us, as long as you're willing to take a bit of abuse in the long run. It's we're certainly happy to have you around.
Never abuse, Mighty Team.
What was that? Sorry.
Never abuse.
No, not abuse. Not abuse. No,
Friendly jousting.
Yes.
I'd call it a friendly negotiation.
That's right. I like it. A friendly negotiation. Very good. Magpie Girl, thank you very much for being on tonight.
It's always a pleasure, Mighty Team.
And Go On Critical, I look forward to chatting with you again next week about hopefully a big win for the Magpies.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks, Jade, and enjoy the black and white colours next week, my friend.
I surely won't.
Thanks a lot, Jade, for coming on.
Pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for listening for another week. This is the Muddy T signing out.
And in the left corner, TD's Rams.
Okay, my round 4 rant is going to be about the improvement of Brodie Grundy this year. I mean, we know in his first season, he had a back injury and then came through back to BFL. He started on the BFL, but he played 2 or 3 amazing games in the BFL season. Then got a call up where he came in about round 18. And then he came against GWS and he played for the rest of the season, and he had some really good games, including his best game against Hawthorn, where he had 20 disposals and 28 hits. So that was great. So he was averaging about 25 touchdowns a quarter, but 2014 was a bit of a rough year for Brody. He just didn't quite. I think he might be a bit ahead of himself over the pre-season from the season, which was a good one. He's come back and had some very average games. Got dropped at round 13 and spent the next couple of weeks in the VFL and came back and played a bit better, but I think he took that bad season and used it. In 2014 he was anger problems where he would lash out and get distracted too easy, but he's come back this year a lot mentally stronger. As you can watch him in his first game in the NAB challenge, he just looked more focused. Nothing was really distracting him. He was just playing hard. And you could tell that he had a big off season that, okay, he's not got much of a motor, he doesn't test well on the running skills, but he's in there, he tries, he tackles, he makes an effort, which is really, really good. And it's really become good. Like in his last game was obviously a little more of his biggest game. He had 21 hit outs and 23 touches. Great game. In fact, this year he's averaging 16 touches. It's great. 2 marks, nearly 5 tackles, and 30 hit outs. That's not bad for a 21-year-old ruckman. And hopefully this season can get better. He keeps getting better this year, and it's been really fun. And they've seen him develop over the years, which is going to be fantastic. And the good thing about this is he should hopefully stay at Collingwood for life, which is good. But it's just be fun watching Grundy get better and better and better in a rant.